Hey, listeners, happy Friday to you. It is time for another episode of the Mental Breakthrough Show. So, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm your host, Zandy Evans, licensed marriage and family therapist practicing here throughout the state of North Carolina. Now, if this is your first time tuning in to Mental Breakthrough, just know that we talk about ways to break through those pain points, those mental pain points, those relationship driven pain points that keep us stuck in a place where we feel like we just struggle to grow. And so we tune in here every Friday at noon to break through those areas where we are having those struggles and improve upon the ways that we can address our mental health and well-being. For my dedicated listeners, we're back. We're here for another week to be able to talk through those areas. And we've got a good one for you today. Today, we'll be talking about interdependence. So this is that balance that we have to have when it comes to codependency. So moving from codependency to interdependence. And that's what we're talking about today. Let's go ahead and thank our sponsor, Built for Mental Wellness. Built for Mental Wellness is a therapy agency that practices throughout the state of North Carolina in areas of anxiety, depression, trauma, relationship issues, and more. If you are interested in starting that therapy journey, just give them a call at 252-751-0243. You can book your free 15-minute consultation at the website builtformentalwellness.com. So as I was saying, with our episode today, we are really talking through interdependence, which is just finding that balance when we're really talking through codependency. So the first thing that we want to make sure that we do is talk about dependency and codependency. Now, dependency, we understand that to basically mean that it's not terribly bad to be dependent in a relationship. In some respect, you're going to have some type of dependency on someone at some point. But we want to make sure that we understand that healthy dependence really allows us to be able to support each other, provide comfort, have and hold encouragement within one another. But it does not become to the point where it's excessive or that your sense of self is not totally dependent upon someone else's encouragement. Because when your sense of self becomes entirely wrapped up into a relationship, that's when you start to cross over into codependency. Historically, when we think about the word or just the phrasing of codependency, we've often thought about that in substance use addiction, saying that one person is providing some type of enabling behavior for the other person to use some type of substance that isn't healthy for them in the long run. But here lately, we also are starting to really coin and term the definition of codependency outside of just substance or outside of addiction, because it's really just looking at when one person is enabling another to engage in something that's not helpful for them, be it addiction, poor mental health, immature responses, or just irresponsibility overall. But what it looks like is putting other people's needs above your own. It looks like the loss of identity or just feeling really responsible for somebody else's emotions and someone else's decision making. And when we open up the definition of this and we look at it on a broader scope, then we really can recognize that this type of behavior, this type of interaction can show up in friendships. It can show up in marriage. It can show up even in the workplace. So the core idea of codependency is that there is some type of self-esteem concern that's there. There's a low self-esteem, and there's that constant need for approval within the relationship. And it's the challenging ability to set a boundary within that interaction. Now, the thing about codependency is that it really can feel like love. But the differentiating factor here that you want to keep in mind is that with codependency, your behavior isn't done in the sense of that subjective love, but it's often driven by the fear that someone will leave, the fear that someone will reject you, or the fear that you're not going to be needed. So it's the driving factor or the driving impulse here is that piece where I'm really scared that if I don't do these things, something bad happens within this relationship that leaves me alone. And that's not fun, right? Just being in a relationship that is really hinges on I have to perform a certain way, and any other performance means that I'm no longer accepted within that relationship by the other person. And that sometimes is what drives people to continue. Now, I want you to understand that let's not get codependency confused with people pleasing, because they can differ. They don't, just because you're people pleasing doesn't mean that you're a codependent type of person within a relationship, but it could mean that it is a symptom of a codependent pattern that's starting to emerge. And what we're going to be looking at is, well, what are the signs? What are the cycles? What are the causes of some of this? So that you can have a better understanding, a clearer understanding, and start to get ready to move to a place of, well, what do I do if I notice that some of these patterns are emerging within myself? And so we will make sure that we talk about that when we come back from the break. So don't go anywhere. You're tuned in to Mental Breakthrough, where I'm your host, Zandy Evans. We'll be back after the commercial break.
Are you suffering with overthinking habits, uncomfortable thoughts or feelings? And are your relationships struggling because of it? Talk today with Built for Mental Wellness. Built for Mental Wellness provides therapy online to individuals, couples, and families across the state of North Carolina. For more information, go to builtformentalwellness.com and sign up today, because wellness is at your fingertips.
Welcome back to the Mental Breakthrough Show, where I'm your host, Zandy Evans, licensed marriage and family therapist practicing throughout the state of North Carolina. On today's episode, we have been talking about interdependence. And in order to get to interdependence, I want to make sure that we cover dependency and codependency, because interdependence really falls between those things in a sense. So before the break, we did touch on dependency, talking about that there are different forms of dependency, and that can be a healthy thing, needing someone, being able to be with someone and having that support. However, when it crosses into the extreme where we are enabling poor behavior, poor mental health, immaturity, irresponsibility, while we're constantly putting other people's needs ahead of our own, while losing ourselves, while losing the ability to speak up for ourselves and have the boundaries that we need to have reciprocal, healthy relationships. This is where codependency can start to occur. So with having just a basic understanding, we're going to talk through a little bit of those signs, those cycles, and some of the causes where you may really start to see codependency come into play. And one of the common things that may happen with codependency is the difficulty with being able to say no, or feeling really guilty when you need to prioritize yourself. So this really does come across sometimes as appearing like people pleasing, where you just really want to place the other person's needs ahead of your own. And at times, where this becomes just a little bit different from people pleasing is if you're putting others ahead of you so much so that your self-esteem is really taking a hit, in the sense that my self-esteem is now low. I don't think much of myself, and I'm fearful of what would happen if I choose to try to prioritize my needs ahead of others, that I would just lose these relationships. And so that's where the codependency starts to emerge. Those patterns start to emerge for you. And so one other area that we want to make sure we understand what codependency looks like in action is that need to fix. That means just trying to be, in a sense, the savior in someone else's story, trying to not be someone that's helping support, but being someone that is in the role of rescuer or saving someone. What you don't want to do is hold someone else up in some of the things that are not healthy for them, just because you don't want them to encounter pain. And let's be real, we're talking about mental health. It is a painful thing that happens, and people go through painful experiences. But we also have to keep in mind that the type of pain sometimes that we have to go through isn't always the type of pain that is destructive, but it's actually what we need in order to be able to grow for ourselves. So keep in mind that when you don't put enough of the trust and care and empowerment into the relationship and have that faith that you need, that someone can stand up for themselves, that they can have some area of accountability, and the way that you support doesn't have to be destructive to the person, making it seem as if they just cannot do. Now, those that are fallen into a lot of these patterns and they have become codependent with another person, they find that they tolerate a lot of unhealthy behaviors just to avoid conflict with that person and just to maintain the relationship. So you don't want to cause any type of bumps or challenges because that fear of that conflict is again driving the fear that is codependency, that someone will leave or someone will reject you or that the person just won't need you. So with this idea of codependency, let's say that you are in this cycle and you're the person that feels like you are the caretaker, you're rescuing that person, you've taken on that role of rescuer, and you're often doing this repeatedly to the enablement of the other person. Because what happens when they can do some of these things themselves, when they don't need you the same? And there's pieces of this that we have to keep in mind, that in order to grow and to have independence in our own life, we have to start to do some of the things that we allowed others to do for us. For example, at some point, you had to become an adult. If you are over 18 listening to this show, which most of my audience is, you had to become an adult and someone had to allow that process to take place. And that meant that you started to slowly have the understanding that, oh, I have to learn how to pay a bill on my own. You didn't just allow your caretaker, your parent, to continuously do that. And if they did that for you for an extended period of time where you had the capacity to be able to do those things for yourself, and you started to grow and find your own independence. However, if you had the wherewithal to be able to do it, but still did not, or was in some way held from doing so, for whatever the reason, right? There could start to be a pattern of codependency to emerge because you are at a space where you could do a lot of these tasks, but maybe for the fear of the other person and for the fear of yourself as also within that relationship, you don't. I'm just giving an example of a parent-child, but what about within a marriage? Typically, in a marriage, we've talked about that you have one person that is more of a spender and the other that's a saver. What happens within the codependency type of emerging patterns here, where maybe if you're the spender, there's a fear that the person that's the saver would just leave you if you continue that. And so some of those dynamics can start to come out in codependency. Therefore, you might just let them take over everything because you don't want to rock the boat in a sense. And so what you're doing is also stopping your ability to learn and to grow and to develop ultimately. You're giving the person permission to be in the role of rescuer for you, when in reality, we are the rescuer of our own narratives. We give that power to others, but we don't always have to do that. And it's a balance. So knowing the difference between that codependency and that support or that interdependence is what we're really trying to get at here. That balance of that healthy dependency versus enablement of things that are not good or healthy for you. A lot of times, these types of cycles or these types of patterns gets reinforced over time because it's considered just an imbalance of power. It just takes away from the authentic relationship that you could be having with the person. So what we have seen over time, just within research as well, is that it's really not uncommon for, if you are a person that's codependent or that you are showing a lot of these traits, right? Just not even put you all the way in the box, but that there's just traits that's emerging there for you. If you are that type of person that has fallen into that cycle, it's not uncommon for you to have unconsciously to pick a partner or friendship that's going to keep the same familiar pattern that you're used to. So if you're not used to being able to take over with doing your own finances, that means you're getting somebody in your partnerships, that's what you're looking for. And some of this is preference, but some of this also could be that you want to have that piece where they take that over and rescue you from yourself. Keep in mind, this isn't always a conscious process. Subconsciously, these things can happen. That this is just something you're used to and you're familiar to, and that's your normal. But what I'm pointing out to you is, I'm asking, is this codependency the thing that's happening? Are there areas in your life where you're leaning heavily to someone trying to allow them to rescue you. Because at the root of a lot of the codependency are your early childhood experiences. And just some examples with this is really just growing up in a home where you could not express yourself emotionally because that wasn't safe for you. Or there was role reversal in a sense in your home where instead of being able to be the child, you were more of a parent or taking care of your parents or your siblings. And so you had to grow up faster than the average child would on a day-to-day basis. And another thing that you really want to keep in mind with the codependency of this as well is that growing up for you, if it felt like you grew up in a space where love was conditional, the reason that we see those particular environments shaping codependency in later life is because those environments are actually teaching us to either suppress our own need or seek value or seek worth through helping or just in the role of rescuing someone. Now, having all of this information, this sets you up to say, one, am I experiencing these things? Does this happen to me? Do I just not feel safe to be emotionally vulnerable? Did I grow up in a space where that happened to me very often? Because if so, are you experiencing fear in your relationships? Fear that someone will leave, fear that they will reject you, fear that they don't need you. Because if these things are occurring for you, you're striving for interdependence. So that's that healthy version of support, balance, boundaries, while still recognizing that you're moving towards a space where you can now think about your love and the person's love as unconditional, not based on conditions. So it's a bit of a rewriting mentally that's starting to happen for you. So we're going to take a break, but when we come back, we will talk about how to break free of some of those codependent thoughts and habits so that you can take those steps towards interdependence, which is that healthy relationship. So don't go anywhere. You're tuned in to Mental Breakthrough. I'm your host, Zandy Evans. We'll be back after the commercial break. This is your mental health tip of the week. True strength isn't about doing everything alone. Interdependence means valuing connection without losing your independence. Healthy relationships allow both people to grow, give, and receive support. Remember, asking for help doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. This week, balance your I and we by reaching out to someone you trust, sharing a win, worry, or simply to just check in, because connection strengthens you both.
Sorry for what I have put you through. Still have you on my mind. My focus been drifting away from you. Just wasn't our time. You can say what you want, but I know you hurt at night. But I tried and I tried and I tried to hold you tight. So I'm here tonight, and I'm giving us one last chance, 'cause I don't wanna lose what we had. 'Cause I'm not feeling right, and I'm tired of this loneliness. Let me prove it, 'cause I swear I will. Love you better, yeah. Love you better. Oh, love you better. Love you better. Lately I've been feeling some type of way. I'm losing my mind. I know saying sorry might not be enough. Just tell me how I can make things right. You can say what you want, but I know you hurt at night. But I tried and I tried and I tried to hold you tight. So I'm here tonight.
Welcome back to Mental Breakthrough, and I'm your host, Zandy Evans. If you guys were feeling that track, that was Love You Better by Lola R. If you're feeling it, make sure that you go out and download that track. Hope you've been enjoying today's episode. If so, make sure that you're liking and following Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok pages at Mental Breakthrough Talk. Now, today we have really talked through dependency and codependency, leaning a little bit more into codependency as we move into your understanding of interdependence. And so on this side of the break, that's what we're talking about. We're going to go ahead and really explore how do you break free of that codependent nature, moving yourself towards a healthier, balanced relationship. So first and foremost, in working towards healing that codependency is going to start with that self-reflection, your self-awareness. And what I've talked about for this episode is really what are the patterns? What are some of the traits? What are some of the things in action that you see with codependency? And the hard thing today is just to ask yourself, when I'm thinking about my relationships, do I do these things? Do I experience this? Have I had that type of thought? Have I had that type of feeling? And if you're still struggling of like, is this me? Ask yourself, where am I neglecting myself in favor of somebody else's needs? Ask yourself, are you afraid of disappointing others more than you value your own peace? Two main questions that will help you know if there are spaces and areas in your life that's being shaped by something that's codependent. Now, if the answer to some of these things are yes, and this is what's happening to me, your next step is to try to expound on it. Really try to get a better understanding of what's happening so that you can be able to say, okay, where do I need to make a little bit of a balance? Where do I need to take a step back? Keep in mind, when I'm saying a step back, I am not telling you to go cut everybody off and become cold. I'm not saying this. I'm asking for what's your small baby step that you get to take in setting a boundary to have a better balance in your relationships between support and enablement. Enablement is the far end, and if you're further to that end of the spectrum, how do you start to swing yourself back towards a better balance of support or empowerment? That's what you're looking for. So that small baby step, when, for example, you need to also be able to voice things of how you're going to prioritize your needs and not just defer to the other person's needs all the time. This is boundary setting. So learning how to say no, learning how to ask for what you need, learning how to detach yourself from that idea that you are responsible for other people's happiness, other people's feelings, other people's life choices. You're going to have to challenge yourself when it comes to that. And as hard as it is, you're going to want to do it, even though you've often been praised for the exact thing that you're trying to create a boundary around. I'll tell you why. The way that you've been praised is when people look at you and say, you're the strong one. You're the best helper. You've been doing this all your life. You're so strong. Those are compliments. But at the same time, it sometimes can hold you in an unhelpful pattern where you've always deferred to others, not just you. Not just recognizing as well what you need, but everyone else has to be straight before you ever can get to yourself. And that is a self-defeating process for you. If you are that person that you are constantly putting yourself last and you never get to you, something about a relationship somewhere holds something that's not balanced. And the question is it codependency? So develop this interdependence by looking for healthy middle ground. That's the goal. Maintain your sense of self, your sense of self-worth while you still support others. So it's showing mutual respect. And remember, respect is something that's perceived, is something that's seen. So that means it has to be discussed, because what I see as respect, the other person might not. And so you have to touch base on what is that mutual respect? So what is something we both can agree on? What is that shared responsibility that we both agree on? How do we have individual growth? What you need, what you're hoping for the other person. Nurture these relationships without feeling blamed and stuck in the relationships that leave you to feeling low, sad, and afraid. Start to move towards hope, feelings of freedom in your relationship. something where you and that other person can describe as feeling respectful. And last but not least, if any of those childhood things I talked about apply to you, go ahead and deal with your past so that it can stop impeding upon your present and stealing away your future. Codependency is something that may occur as a result of things that have happened in the past, but only you have to stay stuck somewhere in the past. It's only a matter of saying, I'm no longer going to stay in this space to begin to deal with something that happened in the past, a past injury, should we say. Reflect on those things, challenge those things, go to therapy for those things. Start with Built for Mental Wellness, because that is where they love to help you. With that, that brings us to the end of today's episode. I hope you have enjoyed it. I have enjoyed being here with you guys, talking through working towards interdependence. Remember, if you're ready for your therapy journey, go ahead and get that consultation with our sponsor, Built for Mental Wellness, at the website, builtformentalwellness.com. Listeners, thank you so much, because without you, there's not a mental breakthrough. And I'm grateful to have you here with me every week. So continue to tune in every Friday at noon to hear more from the Mental Breakthrough Show, where I'm your host, Zandy Evans. If you'd like to be a guest on the Mental Breakthrough Show, or you want to advertise, just go to the website, mentalbreakthrough.org, and click on advertising. That's it for our show today, guys, but I will be here again with you next Friday at noon. So until then, continue to be blessed and break your pain points with some breakthrough talk.